Okay, good vach. I want to dedicate our farbrengen, our Malav Malka stories to Dr. Faster's father, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef ben Rabbi Moshe Yisrael, whose yard site was today. Hashem have an aliyah, may it go to better on behalf of his family for all good. I'll share with you tonight 3 stories. The first story I just heard last week from Rabbi Yitzchak heard it from Rabbi Zelle from Crown Heights, who heard it from the one who the story happened with. Rabbi Yosef Weinberg, all shalom, would always have this radio show right after Shabbos, where he would repeat the Rebbe's words from Shabbos. And the Rebbe himself, by the way, would listen to this radio show. He would repeat the words that were said on Shabbos, and I think it was a similar setup to this year, where Lag BaOmer was on a Tuesday, and he wasn't just repeating from Shabbos, he was also repeating from Lag BaOmer. He also was sharing what the Rebbe had said on the week before on Pesach Sheni. So at that time, there was a certain Rabbi Vechter, Lein Gesund, who lives today in Eretz Yisrael, who was in he was part of the administration of a Satmar yeshiva. And at that time in Williamsburg, having any connection to Lubavitch was considered something unworthy, to say the least. And his study of chassidus, he was enamored with chassidus, was looked at disdainfully by other members of the faculty, and it was eventually something that became dangerous for him. He actually was literally beaten up to an inch of his life. Just to give you an idea of the kind of venom that there was at that time, and hatred, unfortunately, at that time. But I'm only mentioning it because it highlights his sacrifice he had for the teachings of chassidus. When he survived, it was in the 12th of Tammuz, what year it was, he said to his son, he had been beaten up severely, and he said to his son, it was all worth it, just so I could learn the teachings, the sichas of the Rebbe. But the story I'm sharing with you took place a little earlier on. He was still somewhat unknown, his connection to chassidus and to the Rebbe, and he was part of this administration of this yeshiva, and he wanted to hear Rabbi Weinberg's radio program. But where was he going to hear it? So in this yeshiva, in various rooms in the yeshiva, they had radios. But no one would use the radios unless you were really not part of the yeshiva. If you were someone who was unworthy and someone who wasn't part of the yeshiva, so they had these radios in various rooms in the yeshiva. Rabbi Vechter knew that no one would suspect him of listening to the radio because he was part of the administration of yeshiva. Only the lowest of the low would listen to the radio in this yeshiva. But so he decided he'll go into one of those rooms, and he walks into the room and he wants to put on the radio. And in this room, there is one of these Satmar boys who come from a Satmar family, but he was considered what they would call an oisvarf. He was not a reject from the yeshiva, and he was listening, and he put on the radio, and this boy just happened to be in the room. And Rabbi Weinberg is sharing the Rebbe's teachings from Lag BaOmer and from Shabbos, and then he spoke about Pesach Sheni. And he said that the Rebbe spoke about how Pesach Sheni means it's never too late. It's never too late to return to Hashem. No matter what has happened in the past, you're always able to return to Hashem. Just like Hashem gave us a second chance to bring to celebrate Pesach, so too in all in life, there's no such thing as really missing out. Hashem always gives you a second chance. There's no such thing as being too late. There's always another chance. That's what he was talking about. He also mentioned how it's not just about correcting the past, but the word the Torah uses for bringing the Paschal Lamb is tashlumin. Tashlumin means to correct the past, but also comes from the word perfection. So by offering the Paschal Lamb on Pesach Sheni, it also has the ability to perfect the past. So in a similar way, Pesach Sheni teaches us that not only are we able to correct the past, we're also able to perfect our lives. And we're not doomed by the failures of the past. So this yeshiva student, reject yeshiva student, hears this and he's very inspired. He's very inspired because this was something totally foreign to him. He never heard of such a thing. He was always told his whole life that he's a reject, he's not part of the yeshiva, and he's not able to go back and to be like everybody else because of all the mistakes he made. This was such a radical thought for him, coming from this insulated community in Williamsburg at the time, where he was told, no, you're a reject and you can't ever make it in life because you just don't belong. That's what he always heard. So hearing this the first time really made a very deep impression on him and inspired him to actually do teshuvah. He actually became a full Baal Teshuvah. So Rabbi Vechter, he would go every Saturday night and he would study Torah with Rabbi Yoel Kahn, Olav Shalom, the one who would always repeat who memorized Rebbe's farbrengens, and because of him we have transcripts of all the Rebbe's talks that were said on Shabbos and holidays. So he would go every Saturday night, he would study with Rabbi Yoel the whole night, we'd study together, and he shared with Rabbi Yoel what happened that week. Interesting thing, how he should hold on a second. Hyla, you got it? Okay, sorry about that. Anyways, so Rabbi Vechter told Rabbi Yoel Kahn what had happened. Rabbi Yoel Kahn was very impressed, and he wanted to give some nacha, some pleasure to Rabbi Weinberg, telling him how effective his classes were. He told Rabbi Weinberg what happened. Rabbi Weinberg thought this was something that the Rebbe would want to know about, and he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, telling the Rebbe the story. And in his letter, he wrote to the Rebbe that he wasn't thinking of mentioning Pesach Sheni, because it was already a week past Pesach Sheni. However, he decided to mention it because by divine providence, he just decided to mention it anyways, even though he thought it was too late. So he wrote this to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe responded, that's what Pesach Sheni is all about. You thought it was too late, in other words, but it's never too late. That's a story. That's story number one. Story number two, I have two more stories, incredible stories about the power of the tzaddik. In today's Hayom Yom, it says that it used to be that the head of the yeshiva, the rabbi, and the community were separated from each other. The rabbi was lonely, and the community was lonely. The Jew was lonely. And chassidus accomplished the godly novelty that the Rebbe is not alone and the chassid is not alone. That's what it says in today's Hayom Yom. So on that note, there's two stories of incredible stories about our Rebbe. First story I heard from Rabbi Weitman from Brazil, David Weitman. He actually was here a few years ago and shared the story. I hope I'm sharing it correctly with the details. It's been printed in many places, but stories like this. There was a man named Rabbi Chaim C. Schwartz, who was a Holocaust survivor and came to New York in 1947. He visited the previous Rebbe, and he asked the previous Rebbe for advice, what he should do. He's just come to America, and he's a Holocaust survivor. What should he do? And the previous Rebbe told him that he should speak to his son-in-law, which later became the successor of the previous Rebbe, to our Rebbe. And he spoke to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him that since he is knowledgeable in Torah, there is a scarcity at the time of Torah teachers, so he should move to Brazil, where they need Torah teachers, and he should teach Torah in Brazil. That's what the Rebbe's advice was for him. And he took the Rebbe's advice and he moved to Brazil, and he became a Torah teacher in Brazil. His success in teaching was apparent, and he became soon the principal of this Torah elementary school. And one day, a student comes into his office and says, my parents asked if they could possibly speak to you tonight, just for sure. And the parents come over, and the parents say that they have a very tragic thing they need help with, and that is that their daughter wants to get engaged with a non-Jewish man. So he promises the parents, I'm going to I'll try to talk to your daughter. And the parents are very excited. They're hopeful. And he calls up the daughter. The daughter doesn't want to meet him. She calls again. He's persistent. He calls again and again and again. And eventually, the daughter agrees to meet with him. But she was not really interested in anything he had to say. In fact, whatever he said, he wasn't talking with her, he was talking at her. For 2 hours, he was telling her, this is going to hurt your soul. Are you done yet? You're severing yourself from the Jewish community. You finished? When you marry someone not Jewish, you're finishing the link of the golden chain going back to Sarah and Abraham is ending with you. Are you finished? Can I go now? Whatever he said, when your children are going to go up, there's going to be an argument between you and your husband, Hanukkah or the other holiday, Lahavdil. Whatever he said didn't make a difference. Most mixed marriages, they have tension, but it didn't make a difference. She didn't hear a word he said. And he decided, since at the time that time already, the previous Rebbe had passed away, the Rebbe became the Rebbe. So he's going to call up the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe for a blessing for this girl. He had, in general, stayed in touch with Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary, for advice about education. Rabbi Chadakov was the director of Merkez Chinuch, the Chabad Center for Education, and so he decided he's going to ask the Rebbe what to do. If I remember correctly, this was already in 1953, Tafshin Yud Gimel. So the Rebbe Chadakov, when he spoke to someone on the phone, the Rebbe would sometimes press a button to listen to the conversation. People calling this to give information to the Rebbe. Sometimes the Rebbe himself would listen. Sometimes the Rebbe would also respond and press another button so the person who was listening could hear the Rebbe speak to Rabbi Chadakov. Sometimes it was just the Rebbe speaking to Rabbi Chadakov, you couldn't hear. And sometimes the Rebbe pressed another button, you could hear the Rebbe speaking. So Rabbi Chadakov tells Rabbi Schwartz, when he tells him the story about this girl, Rabbi Chadakov says, tell this girl, that there's a man in New York who cannot sleep because she's considering to marry a non-Jew. So he's like, what man? Who can't sleep in New York? And so the Rebbe gets on the phone. The Rebbe says his name. The Rebbe says his name, his full name. And this man is like totally shocked. Is to tell her that this man can't sleep in New York and she should consider that. Okay? He hangs up the phone. He's thinking, 1 second, but how in the world am I supposed to do this? What's the girl going to care if the Rebbe is a man in New York who can't sleep? Why would she even care? I spoke to her for 2 hours. A second later, the phone rings. It's Rabbi Chadakov. Rabbi Chadakov says, the Rebbe said that you should know that when you have a mission to do, you do this mission without any doubts, with joy. If you're sending a mission, do it without any doubts. And you should tell this girl that she knows the Rebbe. She knows who this man is. That's what the message was. Okay? He calls back up the girl. He asks to meet her again. And she's like, I don't want to meet you again for 2 hours. He says, no. I just have to tell you one thing. And he was very happy she agreed to meet him again. He goes to meet her again. And he says, and he's thinking before he leaves, he said, I have to show her who this person is that can't fall asleep at night. And he finds this magazine which has a picture of the Rebbe in it. And he goes to this girl's home. And he shows her. He tells her there's a man in New York. He can't sleep at night. I don't know any man in New York. What are you talking about? He says, you do know who it is. And he shows her a picture of the Rebbe in this magazine. And the girl's face all of a sudden becomes white. She says that every night she's having this dream. This man in this magazine is coming to her in the dream and saying to her that she should not leave her Jewish roots. And so she was very touched. She says, if this man cares so much about this, cares so much about me, that he can't sleep at night, and it's so important, okay. And he explained to her, it wasn't just a man, that just the Moshe Rabbeinu of each generation has a deep bond with every single soul, and therefore feels what's going on in each soul. So on that note, I'll share with you the last story for tonight. I think this story is an even more amazing story than the one I just shared, because it took place more recently, and not with people of such great caliber like Rabbi. Meaning, it's not a story of so it's so dramatic, and yet it has the same flavor and highlights the same truth in an amazing way. It's two girls in Plano, Texas, who became very close with the Horowitz and Bloch families, the Shluchim, the Rebbe's emissaries in Plano, Texas, through the camp that they made, the summer camp, the Gan Yisrael summer camp. And they also became close to a girl named Itty Barber, who ran the camp many years in a row. And one year, they weren't from a religious family at all. They didn't go to a Jewish school. But one year, a few months, like this time of year, not this time of year, sorry. About in the winter time, Itty Barber calls up Vicky and Stephanie and tells them, there's this amazing thing in New York called the C-Teen Shabbaton. And they have about 700 teens from all over the world get together in New York, and they have an amazing time together. And they celebrate Judaism, and they have this thing in Times Square where they have a concert, and it's so lively and so amazing. You guys will love to come. So Stephanie and Vicky are listening, but yeah, but you don't know our parents. Our parents are very protective. Parents would never think of allowing us to go for a whole weekend in New York. It's just not going to happen. So Itty says, just ask. Okay. So they asked their parents, and as they predicted, their parents are very against it. They don't want them to go. All right. So fine, they told their head counselor, Itty, that, yeah, we asked our parents and they're interested. They said no, they're worried. They said New York is a dangerous place. It's not a good idea. We don't want you to go. All right. So Itty was persistent. She said, listen, there's a raffle for a scholarship for the Shabbaton. Just enter the scholarship. Enter the raffle. Maybe you'll win. And maybe if you win, your parents let you go. They had nothing to lose, but they didn't think it would make a difference. So they entered the raffle. And sure enough, Stephanie wins the raffle. She gets a full scholarship for the Shabbaton. And then there was another drawing a little later. And Vicky also won the raffle. And two of her friends won the raffle. So they go back to their dad. They say, Dad, we won the raffle. Can we go? And that's you won the raffle? All right, you guys can go. No problem. They were shocked. They couldn't believe it. I mean, this was so not in their parents' way of doing things. They couldn't believe that they gave them permission to go to New York City for a whole weekend. Unbelievable. And they came to Crown Heights for that Shabbos. And for them, it was like they're like fish in water. They came, they loved it. They saw a whole new culture they never knew about before. Coming from Plano, Texas, all of a sudden they see Kingston Avenue with all of its colorful Jewish stores, all types, all kinds of restaurants and bakeries and all kinds of people in the streets and the whole Shabbos together and what Shabbos was like with so many people. And then the finale, the Havdalah that's done in the C-Teen Shabbaton in Times Square with literally 700 children with many more staff members all together, 1,000 people, and they're singing, and it's in Times Square. It was electrifying. They loved it. And after the Saturday night event, the C-Teen Shabbaton takes all the children, all the high school students, to the Rebbe's Ohel. They didn't know why they're going to the Ohel, what going to the Ohel is about, but they explained to them that, the tzaddik of every generation is like the Moses of the generation, and he could pray for you, and you give him a letter, and he can pray to God for you. So they're very, okay, why not? Stephanie wrote a letter and asked the Rebbe for a blessing that her grandmother should get better, and that her mother's eyesight should return. Her mother's eyesight should be strengthened. That's for sure. She wanted a blessing for her grandmother's health and for her mother's eyesight. Anyways, before she leaves, there is she notices someone handed her, before she goes back home to Texas, someone handed her a brochure about it's called the Uncamp by Rabbi Manis Friedman. He's a camp for women in Iowa, a 3-week camp in the summertime. and it's a great opportunity for those who want to learn about Judaism. So someone handed it to her. Maybe she'll consider going there. She was sure her parents wouldn't let her go there, but she took it with her. Whatever, who knows? She saw her parents let her go to the Shabbaton. She didn't think that would happen either. Anyways, she comes back home and she's unpacking, and this brochure picks out from other stuff, and she asks her dad shyly, "Dad, what do you think about me going to this summer camp?" And her father immediately says, "I think that would be a great idea. And I think your sister Vicky should go too." And she's totally shocked. Like, "What? Dad, can you please tell me what brought about this change? Why you suddenly had this change of heart? Why let's go to the Shabbaton? Where is this coming from? This is so unlike you. Where does this come from?" And her dad says, "It's nothing." She says, "Dad, please tell me. I know that something's going on." So her dad said like this. She said that after you asked me about going to New York, and I didn't want you to go, I didn't think it was safe, I went to sleep and I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw a picture of the man in the living room of the Horowitzes. The Horowitzes have a picture of the Rebbe in their living room. I saw that man in my dream, and he said to me, "You should let your daughters go to New York. I'll make sure that they're safe." It was the Rebbe had come into his dream and told us that. So he was totally blown away by that. And after he saw the Rebbe in his dream, he said, "I saw you, Stephanie, in a cemetery, and I saw you praying that your mother's eyesight should get better and that grandma should get healthier." And Stephanie couldn't believe it, because her father had the dream far before she had gone to New York. He agreed to let her go to New York because of seeing the Rebbe in his dream, and then on the Sunday after she had gone to New York, that's when she asked Rebbe for a blessing for her mother and for her grandmother. So she was totally blown away. Anyways, she went to the camp, and she really learned a lot about kosher and about Shabbos, and she really got so excited that she began a 18 chapter in Plano, Texas, and by the following year, there was already 27 girls that came with her to the Shabbaton. She really created a whole energy with her and her sister Vicky, and it really brought a whole renaissance in Judaism in her school, and still today there are many other students in that city which are part of C-Teens and inspiring other people, but all because of that dream. And Stephanie ended up going to Mayanot in the Chabad Women's Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and she actually spoke at the International Chabad Conference for Women they have every year in 2016. She told everyone this story and how she feels wherever she goes in the world that she's never alone. She's always with Torah, with Shabbos, with Chabad, wherever she goes around the world. Anyways, bottom line is, as it says in today's Hayom Yom, that a Jew is not alone, a chassid is not alone, the Rebbe is not alone, and that we have a shepherd who intercedes on our behalf on high for every request that's made for a blessing, and we should all have a wonderful Geschmacke Freilich Avach, and we should celebrate immediately in Yerushalayim with Mashiach Tzedekenu. Mashiach comes, we're again going to have Hakafis, as if it's Simchas Torah. It's just such an immediate celebration and joy without any limitation. So it's the time. This is the time coming from Parshas Bahar B'Chukosai, coming to the week of Bamidbar, the week where all the Jewish people are all counted. We should celebrate with the Simchas Torah and the 10th counting of the Jewish people. In history, the Jewish people counted 9 times. Mashiach comes, we're all going to be counted again, and we're all going to see how we all count. L'chaim, l'chaim, a good avach.